share the data between two applications, you need to use Content Provider. And Content Provider is one of the fundamental components of Android. So in this particular session, we're going to learn about what exactly is Content Provider, how exactly you can use the Content Provider in your application, the complete implementation part, and what is the architecture, what is the high-level architecture of Content Provider when you use that in your application. So what is a Content Provider? Content Provider is a component which allows you to fetch the data that app requests from a repository. The app doesn't need to know about the name of the database also or the name of the table itself. Content Provider will make sure that you will still able to access the data without even knowing the detail of your database itself. So what is a Content Resolver? Content Resolver is a class which gives you the access of your Content Provider. So here you have to create an object of Content Resolver which will give you the in turn access of the methods like query, insert, update, delete from your Content Provider. So how do they work? How exactly Content Provider and Content Resolver works together? Well, inside your activity or adapter class, you have to create an object of Content Resolver, and which in turn is going to call your Content Provider. And your Content Provider, inside your Content Provider, you will be providing your SQLite database or your database, right? So whatever you learned in your previous session, how to create the SQLite database will be kept inside your Content Provider. So Content Provider act as a wrapper class around your database. So the users or the other apps when may request for your Content Provider, they don't even know the name of the database you are using, or they don't even know the details of the database. They will still able to use it, but of course you have to provide the permissions to access them. So what exactly a Content Provider is good for? Well, it is very good for accessing the data from the different application in a secure manner, and also managing the permissions between the different apps to access the data. It also provides you a standard way of accessing the data, and if you want to, if your data is too much in your database, you can always use cursor loader also to access the data from the Content Provider. So how exactly other apps can access your Content Provider? Let's say you have an app, and inside your app you have a Content Provider created inside that, and inside that Content Provider you have your database. So if any other app want to get the access of your Content Provider, they need to again create the Content Resolver from wherever they are calling it, and then they have to get the access of your Content Provider. That will be happening if they have the path that is called content URI. We're going to discuss about it. And once they have the content URI plus the permission which your Content Provider application requires them to implement in their application. So if they have that permission inside them, then only they will be able to access it. So now before we discuss for app with Content Provider, let's just take some example of application which uses the Content Provider of other application. For example, WhatsApp. Whenever you install WhatsApp in your device, what happens is automatically all the contacts from your contact application comes to your WhatsApp, whosoever is using WhatsApp, of course. How exactly it is doing that? If you have noticed that whenever you install your application, it does ask you that these are the permissions you are agreeing to. So if you agree to those permissions, then it gives you the access of the Content Provider which is placed inside your contact application. So that's the way your WhatsApp is able to access the data from your contact application. Otherwise, there was no way to access the data from your contact application. The way they are doing it is with the help of Content Provider. So this is the high level diagram what happens inside an application which contains the Content Provider. There will be your app, and inside your app, to access the Content Provider, you will be providing the Content Resolver object. And plus after Content Resolver object, there will be a permission also which you want to put inside the app, so that the other application, if they want to use your Content Provider, they have to put this permission inside their manifest file. And inside your application only, now you will be creating a Content Provider class by extending it the Content Provider. Once you create a Content Provider class, inside that you will be implementing your SQLite OpenHyper class, because that's the class which is responsible for creating your database. And that SQLite OpenHyper class will in turn access your data. And once you access your data, then it will be accessed by a content provider, and then the content resolver, it will be given to the content resolver. So in this way, the data or the architecture looks like. Anybody wants to access the content provider, they need to have a content resolver plus the permission, and then once they have the URI to access the content provider, then they and the permission plus, then they can access the content provider, and then in turn content provider will solve their request, whether it is insert or query, and will give the data back to the application or to the request made. And then there is a contract class also. What exactly contract class does? Contract class will provide you the information about all the constants or the content URI, the path to access your content provider, or the tables, the name of the tables, or MIME type, or any constant you want to put there. So it's a class which will make sure you have all the constants which you will be needing to access your content provider. So when we talk about data repository, that means which is going to be the classes which are going to create your database. Those classes will be, again, under the hood, nothing but the SQLite OpenHyper class. So you will be extending a class with the SQLite OpenHyper class, and under the hood, you will be creating the database inside that class only. Then there will be a contract class which will specify the URIs to query the data, or the table structure data, or the MIME type, the kind of data which you are returning, or any constant which you have to define for your content providers. Then you will be creating a content provider. Of course, to create a content provider, you need to extend a class with the content provider class only, and it is an abstract class, so you have to override all the methods like query, insert, delete, update, get type. So once you have all these methods, inside these methods, you will give the access of the database, but not the details. Like if somebody wants to insert the data, they will call the insert method of content provider. Now inside the insert method of content provider, you will access the SQLite OpenHyper class and insert the data there. But the other application or the user is only knowing that he is accessing the insert method of content provider. So in this way, it is making the data integrity, and you are not sharing any details of your SQLite or database details to the other application. To access the content provider, you do need to create the object of the content resolver class. Once you have the content resolver class object, then you can access the methods like query, get type, or insert, which are defined inside the content provider class. So let's just talk about implementing the content provider now. You have seen the high-level architecture of content provider. So to implement it, first you need to create the database class. That you can, we all know how we can do. Just extend the SQLite OpenHyper class and provide all the database methods there, on create, on upgrade, and all. Then you have to create a normal class which will provide the information about the content provider itself, like content URI, how you can access the content provider, or the path for the content provider. All that information will be given inside a single class known as contract, or you can just directly put that information inside the content provider class itself. Then you will be extending then you will be creating a new class, or which will be extending your content provider class, and implement the methods there. What are the methods like query, get data, get type, insert, delete, update. So all those methods are abstract methods which are there inside your content provider, which you need to implement in the subclass which you are going to create. Then to access the content provider, get the content resolver. Get the content resolver object inside the activity or adapter, and then access the content provider. But that's not all you have to do. You have to pass, or you have to set the permission inside your Android manifest file also to access the content provider, so that the other application, before accessing it, they provide the permission. They have the permission to access your application or the content provider of your application first. So why SQLite database again? Because it represents the data in the table form, rows and columns, and it has the same operation like your content provider. SQLite database also, if you remember, in our last class we did this same operation: query, insert, delete. SQLite database also provides the same methods to you, predefined methods. So it's easy to work around with SQLite database class with the content provider, and returns the data as cursor. And we all know how easy it is to navigate through the cursor. Contract class. So what exactly you will be doing in contract class? You will be creating it as a public class so that content provider can access it. And what exactly it will be containing? It will be containing the content URIs or the URI schemes to query your data. It may contain the tables or column names that to be returned. Might not have to be the exact name which are there in your database, but yeah, you can create the alias also. It will tell you the MIME type which has to be returned, or the type of data which is going to be returned by this particular content provider or a particular query. Or if there are some other constant which you want to declare to make your life easier, you can declare that too inside your contract class. So let's just talk about the content URI first. Before we talk about that, we know that if I want to access the web pages, I will use http:// and if I want to access any file, I will use file:// This is called schema whenever I want to use a web page and all. Similarly, if I want to use a content provider, I need to use content as prefix every time. So content:// So this will be my prefix here for accessing my content provider. If I want to, if I have created any content provider of my own also, I need to start it with content:// and /. After that, you can see at the bottom, after that you can provide a name of your own choice. It can be any. It can be com.my.lalit.content.provider, and then the table name which you want to access. So let's just, we will see more about how exactly we can design this. Now let's just talk about the URI in more general form. It will always start from schema. That will be content:// So to access any content provider, you have to put this schema always. Second is the authority. Third is the path, and then there is ID. Authority will represent the domain. So it can be anything. A user can define its own domain also. It can be my own customized domain also. Let's say com.my.own.lalit.provider. You don't have to end it with provider always, but it is customary that you, if you are declaring a content provider, you put the provider at the end. But it's not necessary. Then the path. The path of the data, what you want to access. It can be a table name. Generally, it will be a table name which you want to access. And then there is ID. ID is what row you want to access inside that table. So in this way, let's say there are two tables or 2 or 3 tables. So the first two parts, schema and authority, will remain same. The only thing which is going to change is the path and the ID. So in a more broader term, authority will be considered as your domain. Content path will be passed to your data, and content URI is accessing a one set of data or maybe a table. So this is how you will be defining it in your code. You will be providing authority. It can be anything like I told you. In our case, it is com.android.example. Whatever the provider name you want to give, and then the provider, as it is customary. And then we are providing the content path at words. That is, words is my table here right now. Now, at the end, I want to create a URI. So I will create a URI class object, that is content URI, and I will parse whatever I got, by using URI.parse, and I know my schema will start from content:// and then put the authority, and after that, this will give me the access of content provider. After that, I want to access the table, words table, then again concatenate, and concatenate what? Content path. So in this way, you can create as many as content URI to access the different data sets if you have in your content providers. So you can also provide some constants inside the content provider itself. Let's say there is a database name. If you want to put as a constant at the top, you can put that too. Or if you want to provide the table name as a constant, you can put that too. Or columns also, so that you can access them directly whenever you need throughout the whole content provider class. You can also provide the constant for your table definition, like maybe the database name or the table name or the columns name also as constants, so that you can use them later on in the class. MIME type. This will be the type which you will be returning from a abstract method known as getType. So it will tell you which type of data your provider is returning to you while you are querying from it. It can be web pages, it can be application or JSON format also, or text or HTML too. If you have a vendor specific MIME type, you are going to provide this path. First, you are going to define the type, which will be vendor. Then you are going to define the subtype. If you are going to access a single row, or if you are going to access more than one row. If you are going to access the single row, then it will be subtype will be android.cursor.item. And if you are going to access more than one row, then it will be android.cursor.dir. Then you have to provide the provider specific part, which will be again vendor dot the name and the type. Name will be the globally unique company or domain name, or it can be package name. And the part is again corresponds to your URI pattern or the table name itself. So let's just see this in action. So if you are accessing multiple words, again the vendor type VND, then there will be the because you are accessing multiple, so the subtype will be android.cursor.dir. If you would be accessing just a single word, then the vendor type would be that the subtype would be android.cursor.item. And then you have VND, and then the provider specific path. First thing will be your domain name. It can be com.example.provider, or it can be your package name also. Or if I'm creating my own application, it might be com.lalit.myownprovider, and then the table name. So you will be defining these MIME type as constants inside your contract class. So there will be a method, like I told you, you have to override getType inside your content provider, which will actually correlate with all the whatever the data you are getting from your content provider. If it is a multiple data you are getting, then you have to match it with the URI match. And if it is the single data you are getting, then there will be a different constant for that, and you will be getting the data back as a single row. Now let's just talk about constant. Well, constant are used by multiple classes in an app, and they are specifically designed for the convenience for client use only. So if somebody wants to access your content provider and they have defined some constant there which are not going to change, it's going to be a great help to the user who is going to use your content providers. Let's just see the content provider itself, how we can implement the content provider. So you will be creating a class by extending the class name content provider, and then you have to implement these methods there: query, insert, delete, update, and then interact with the backend data. And what is the backend data? That's the open SQLite open helper class which you have created already. So you have to interact within these methods. You have to call those methods which are defined in your SQLite open helper class, and do the functionality respectively. If you want to insert, then call the insert method from the SQLite open helper class in the insert of your content provider. So this is the small code snippet to implement the insert method inside your content provider. This insert method has been overridden from your content provider class, and inside this you can see that I'm using an object of SQLite open helper class, and then using the insert method of your SQLite open helper, and I'm passing the values there. And once the data is inserted, it will return me a ID there, and then in return I'm returning a URI here, where I'm doing what? Whatever the content URI I have, that is to access the content provider, plus I'm adding the ID which I got by adding the data inside my database. So I'm updating that content URI here. So every operation you will be doing in your content provider, after that you want to return the updated URI to the content provider, so that my content provider is constantly aware about that. Okay, now I have this much data inside my database. At the end, you have to provide the permission in your manifest file. Until unless you don't do that, your content provider is not secure. So by default, with no permission, any app can access the content provider for reading and writing. So if you do not provide any permission, any app can access your content provider for reading and writing. You have to set the read or write permission inside the manifest file. First of all, how do I register my content provider inside the manifest file? We have a tag provider and then give the provider class name which you have just created by extending the content provider class. And once you do that, after that, you have to put the authority also here. Authority is the same authority which I defined while I created my content URI. So make sure this authority and the authority which you are defining there is same. That's the only way you can access your content provider. So every time anybody wants to, other application also wants to access your content provider, they have to put this same authority there plus the other part of the whole content URI too. Export it true so that other application can also use your content provider. So this is how you can define the permissions inside the provider. There will be an attribute and Android read permission, and this inside which you can give any permission there. It can be a customized permission also, com.lalit.my.provider.read permission, and for the same com.lalit.my.provider.write permission. Now, once you define these custom permission inside your provider, now any application at all wants to use your content provider, they have to use these permission. They have to define these permission inside their manifest file. So inside their manifest file, they will be using uses permission and the same permission which you have just given here. So the same permission they have to define in the manifest file like this. So the client side will be defining that permission by using uses permission and com.android.example. Whatever the domain name you have, and then the permission name. So next, we need to use the content resolver to access your content provider. So this is the high level block diagram of content resolver. It must use to send the request as query to the content provider. If I want to use any query statement, or I want to insert the data to the content provider, or I want to update the data to the content provider, you have to use content resolver. The data is returned in the form of cursor object, that is as rows and columns. So content resolver contact to your, you have to define the content resolver inside activity first, and then it in turn interact with your content provider, and content provider interact with your SQLite open helper class, and SQLite open helper class goes to your SQLite database and gives you the data back in the same reverse chronological order. So to access the methods, what you need is content resolver object, and then just access the method query, insert, delete, update. So here is the small code snippet for querying your database from your content provider. Here, first thing will be the URI, that is content URI, the path for accessing your content provider. Second will be the projection, the columns you want to access, the name of the columns. Third will be the where clause, and fourth will be the values to that where clause, and fifth will be your sort order by ascending or descending. So if you have to see this whole thing in action, you can see that it will be returning you a cursor object only. You can get the access of your content resolver object by calling getContentResolver, then .query, and then pass the URI, your content URI, then the projection and the selection clause, and the values to the selection and the order. Now let's just see the whole code snippet of query method. Here you will be first putting the content URI inside the string of your query URI, and then you will be providing the projection, the name of the table or the name of the columns inside the table, and then you will be providing the name of the columns or the where clause and the values to the where clause. So I know it's a lot to take on to the content provider. You have so many classes. You have to define SQLite database also. You have to define contract class also. You have to define data model also. Let's just take a recap of this whole thing. First thing is first that you will be defining a database class under the hood, because without database there will be nothing. So first database class, and then you will be how exactly you will be defining the database class? By using the SQLite open helper class only. Then you will be providing the permissions to the manifest file by declaring the, of course, provider tag. And then you will be wrapping your SQLite database class inside your content provider. And then you will be exposing that URI, content URI, to other apps so that they can access your content provider. And the way to access your content provider is with the help of your ContentResolver class. Once you implement all these steps, you will be able to create a content provider, which in turn will give the access to other apps, the access of your database. There will be a practical which you guys will be performing in your Git book. I would recommend that you try that practical to understand the content provider better. To learn more about content provider, you can follow the following links. Next, we are going to see the concept and the practical of the content provider in our Git book. Thank you.